Welcome to the LSU. I'm your host, Beef Loaf. This show is being powered by From the 108 and FromThe108.com, where you can get all of our content top to bottom. Blogs, podcasts, and videos, including the world-famous Sunday Soak. You can get all of our merch there as well, including the infamous Wave Sucks and hashtag 108 in garbs. Currently, we have a Cyber Monday, I guess it's called, sale that's going to run out by the time most of you listen to this. Although if you're watching live, you can go hit the link at FromThe108.com and get 50% off of basically everything. We got a code there, CM50 for today. Also, you can get our brand new Wave Sucks beanies. They're $23, perfect for winter, and Jeff Passan approved. This show is powered by you, the loyal 108 supporter. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to tickle the undercarriage in the process. Like, comment, turn on notifications, and most definitely turn on super chats, because that's how we get paid, and that's how we make the content you know and love. Tonight's guest... He's a contributor at Sox On Tap and an old friend of the 108ers in these White Sox Twitter content streets. NWI Steve, welcome back to the LSU, my friend.
Beefy, how you doing, baby? I'm psyched to get together here. I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about Connor Bedard and some of the rumors going on. No, that's
no. You know, it's kind of funny. I know almost nothing about hockey, and it's not for not trying. It just doesn't absorb. And like when the Hawks were good, I watched and I paid attention. I was like, I kind of get what's going on, but I don't really understand it. But the other day, I just tweeted Connor Bedard, because I want to stay in the Chicago sports algorithm. I don't want to get thrown out because it's going to be the biggest thing that's out there. So I got to stay with the times.
Yeah, no, and listen, the algorithm, it's changing, it's evolving every day, and you got to stay in the loop here, and that's forward thinking on your part right there. A little bit of foreshadowing for what we're going to talk about here.
A little bit. Now, you know what? Some of your fans out there, they've been very hurtful. They've been pushing me on mentioning a certain thing that happened over the weekend that I'm not going to mention, Steve. I'm just not going to talk about it. I told all these people I'm not mentioning, mostly because I don't really know all the things that are going on. I just hope you're okay. That's all I'm worried about. I just hope you're okay.
I'm respectfully going to decline comment on this, and I've asked that my privacy be respected during these trying times. But also, I would just like to say, fuck CM Punk, that crybaby Cub fan bitch.
Thank you. I think that answers that for everybody. All right. I've been wanting to talk to you because I've read a couple of your articles recently, and they really piqued my interest. Now, one, I knew you were big in on this guy to begin with, but in October, when Chris Getz was kind of turning over things, we'll say, in the front office and in the coaching staff, he went out and hired Brian Bannister. And Brian Bannister, I don't know what his official title is. I think he's senior advisor to pitching or something like that. But I call him the pitching czar. And he's been a guy who has been out front of the data and been helping pitchers for damn near a decade now, kind of doing work that didn't exist when he came onto the scene. Why are you totally in love with him? Because I feel like you have a love affair with this man.
Well, listen, he's got ties to the Kansas City Royals organization, so we are contractually obligated, according to the Geneva Convention, to have an affinity for him as Sox fans. That's required, first and foremost. But on a serious note, a lot of it does go back to the entire chapter that was written about him in the MVP Machine in that book that came out in 2019. I know you and I have had discussions about this in the past, and while we're at the point now where the game has evolved over the course of the last 4 years and that many of the concepts probably discussed in the books are outdated at this juncture. But I think the core piece of the Bannister chapter is talking about needed to constantly evolve, needed to constantly be looking for that next thing. One of the main pieces of the book is about growth mindset. What you're doing right now might be working, but it's not going to continue to work just because. And one of his quotes in there that he talks about is, I can beat the league in the short term, but I can't beat them in the long term. So I always need to be looking for the next thing. That's the type of idea and the type of mindset that I think you and I have really been hoping that the White Sox would have for a long period of time. You go back and you think about when Coop was here and all the moves and all the guys that were brought in to work underneath him. And one guy I always go back to is on the back end of the Javi Vasquez deal to the Yankees, when Jeff Marquez was the center piece of that. All the talk was just get him in here, let Cooper work with him, teach him the cutter, and he's going to be fine. Because every pitcher that they acquired from that time frame from like 2007 to 2015 had to start throwing the cutter. It was just a bylaw in Coop's world. Yeah. But you can't continue to do that. You have to evolve. You have to see how the league is changing, and you have to individualize things for the players themselves. And that's one of the things that Bannister really harps on.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like a lot of the Bannister discussion and reading the MVP machine, but also even just following up. Like I've watched probably or listened to 3 hours plus of him on podcasts and different YouTubes and whatever. And it is a growth mindset all the time, Steve. He talks about even if you could find an edge for a little while to exploit, or an edge that only works with a particular pitcher that it's something you want to push on. And something that was interesting to me that I had heard in a fairly recent discussion, he was on someone's podcast talking. He was talking about deception, the use of deception in pitchers. He said it's tough to model and it's tough to figure. But he goes, but once you nail it, you know what it is. And so like I kind of like when I was looking at the acquisition they just did, the goofy 5-for-1 that people are either dancing in the streets for or saying, oh, who cares? But Jared Schuster, who they brought in, is a guy who that is part of his game. And I kind of wondered, man, I wonder if Bannister is already kind of looking at some of these things like, well, this is a guy who kind of uses this. Maybe we can bring him in and see how this works.
So it's funny that you mentioned him because there's a guy that he worked with in San Francisco that was kind of known for deception for a long period of time. And then Bannister helped to at least play some part of a role in resurrecting Alex Cobb. Remember when he came up with the Tampa Bay Rays? He was a guy that was looked at as someone that could be at the front of their rotation for a long period of time. He pitched and helped Tampa Bay to defeat the Cleveland Indians in the one-game playoff in 2013, which just warmed my heart very much.
Of course.
And you know, Cobb is a guy that has a little bit of funkiness in his motion. He's got a little bit of hesitation in there, and that could be the type of thing that Bannister is talking about right there. And so, again, just looking for something little that maybe the rest of the league isn't thinking about right there and trying to incorporate that could maybe unlock something for him here in Chicago that maybe it didn't in Atlanta.
Yeah, it's promising to hear Bannister and hear him talk about exploiting edges. Now, what are your thoughts on the White Sox, starting from the point that they hired Bannister as far as acquiring pitching or relieving themselves of pitchers that are on the roster? How much input do you think Bannister is having in these decisions?
I think that there's got to be a fair amount of input that he's having. And I think him and the relationship that he had with Ethan Katz, who you famously know from the Katz Lab, that is very popular on the streets of Twitter.com. You know, those two guys working together in San Francisco. So there's a level of familiarity there. And I would venture to say that Getz is probably having discussions with them about the types of guys that they want to try to bring in. Because again, and I went back and I looked at Bannister's most recent time with the Giants. A lot of the guys that they brought in, you can look at Logan Webb. Obviously, that's the guy that finished runner-up to the Cy Young this year, and this is one of the top young pitchers in the sport. But a lot of the other guys that they brought in were journeymen that were kind of at crossroads in their careers. You think about Alex Cobb, who I mentioned earlier. Think about Kevin Gausman.
Yeah.
The way he bounced around from Baltimore to Atlanta to Cincinnati, and then he got to the Giants. And obviously, it wasn't all Bannister there, but something clicked for him there. He was able to parlay that into a big deal with the Toronto Blue Jays. Sean Manaea, we've seen a little bit of an evolution with him. Yep. These are kind of mid-level to low-level guys that he was able to get a lot out of in conjunction with the rest of the Giants staff. And those are the types of guys that the Sox are really going to be kind of focusing on here going forward. We all know they're not going to be in the market for the big-name pitchers. So the fact that he's had success tweaking some of these guys and getting more out of them is a little bit encouraging to me. And that's part of the reason why I'm optimistic for him joining the organization. Yeah,
absolutely. And coming from a philosophy in San Francisco that I thought was one that would work well in Chicago, because the White Sox are not willing to spend at the top of the market. And San Francisco was doing it across the roster. It wasn't just pitching. They were doing it on the position player side too, trying to resurrect players, platoon players, just kind of get the highest and best use out of guys. Let's get to a drink real quick here. Andy says, cheers, fellas. Glad to be home to catch this live. Thanks, Andy. Appreciate you, my friend.
Having to slum it with the water here tonight after got after the
hey, long weekends happen. Don't worry about it.
Got after the whiskey pretty hard with friend of the show Matt Crawford on Saturday night.
I'm sure. Let's get to one more. Baloney says, I'm just happy the Aju is back as I am for the return of CM Punk. All right, here we go. They're coming at you, Steve. I'm sorry about that, but thank you, Peter.
That's just uncalled for. All this
that's
talk
not
about
friends.
Pepsi, about Pepsi, Phil. I feel personally attacked.
Back on Bannister, why is it that Michael Kopech's the number one guy he has to fix, Steve? I saw your article this morning, and some of it opened my eyes, just the thoughts on Kopech, but they're true. I mean, we're at that point with Kopech. He's at the crossroads of his career, basically.
So you look at it, he's ARB2 this year, and he's projected to make a little bit over $3 million. I think if you look at every objective measure in 2023, he was the worst pitcher in the sport. And since he came back in the 2021 season after that 2.5-year layoff, we've seen some numbers go the wrong way with him. We've seen the walk rate increase exponentially. We've seen the velocity decline. The quality of contact has increased against him. So the fact of the matter is, if he has another bad year the way that 2023 went, you're looking at a non-tender candidate right there. So Bannister's got to kind of figure out, and I tied a parallel from the MVP machine with Rich Hill, who was another former highly touted prospect, journeyman. And Bannister really got him to focus on utilizing his breaking ball to set up hitters. So with Kopech, whether it's figuring out different pitch usage, pitch maximization, or perhaps changing everything entirely, there's got to be something there that he can extract out of him to improve the results, because what we have seen and the steady decline over the last 1.5 to 2 years is very troubling, to say the least, for a guy that was at one point a top 50 prospect in the sport. And really the return at the major league level here has just been so helter-skelter that if we continue to see him just go out there and walk the ballpark and give up home runs at an astonishingly high rate, I don't know how you could continue to roster him into 2025.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't disagree. I couldn't agree more on that. And I was shocked reading that when you put it in there, Steve, that he could be a non-tender candidate. And that's right. Like, he was so bad last year. It's like, okay, well, we'll take another shot on him, because he was decent for spurts in 2022. And obviously in 2021, he was a very good reliever. But it kind of makes me wonder how much of this is just like a tear down and restart over, because he has built like a brick shithouse. However, it seems like unless he's at the top of his health, he can't manage. Like, he just can't cope. Like, he's not the type of guy who can be missing a pitch for a day and look okay. And he's not the type of guy who, when he's got the gimpy knee or the gimpy shin, that he's okay to like, oh, okay, well, he'll tough it out and give you 5 innings. I wonder how much of this is like more of a holistic breakdown. And Bannister is open to everything from reading about him. It's not just, oh, like you mentioned with Coop up front, oh, we'll teach you the cutter. No, it's anything he can figure out. Anything that's in anywhere or any idea, he's willing to attack.
And I hate to use this term to describe Kopech, but it is something that is used a lot in baseball circles. Is Kopech kind of seems like he's what's referred to as a 100%er. That if he's not 100% all the time, he just can't go. And you have people like that all the time. And, what did Greg Maddux talk about for so much of his career? That, if you have a 10 start stretch right there, you're going to have maybe 3, maybe 4 starts max where you have your good stuff. And then you're going to have another 3 to 4 where you're just going to be okay. And then 2 more that you're just going to have to completely gut out entirely. And Kopech has not shown the ability to be a guy that can gut through those 2 outings where he has nothing, or even get through those outings where he's got just mediocre stuff and be able to get you 5-6 innings and put the team in a position to win. Everything has to be perfectly aligned on that given day, and that's really a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question about it. Now, with regards to skeptics of Bannister, I've heard a little bit of this, and from smart people say, you know what, Bannister at this point might be a little bit behind the curve. He might not be kind of at the front of this anymore. Why are you confident that he's still going to thrive here in Chicago, even if there are people who say, well, you know what, he was at the front of the curve, and now he's kind of, maybe he's aging out of it, because these types of things do happen.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly do. But I just think that, again, from a mindset aspect of things, and him being very open about, I need to constantly be evolving. I need to constantly be looking at what that next potential edge is. Because what I did maybe 2 years ago in San Francisco, the rest of the league has caught up. And now I need to find a way to adapt. And sometimes, when you try new things and you try to adapt, not everything is going to work. And that could be what some of that potential criticism is right there. But just not staying stagnant is part of the reason why, I have optimism for him, because it's not just, okay, this is the cookie cutter approach that we're going to take with things, and it's going to work because just trust me, bro.
agree 100%. He seems open-minded to trying anything and open-minded to delving into anything. Like some of the things I've heard him talk about is like, yeah, you go looking for something and then sometimes you don't find anything. I was like, yeah, that is how you look for edges. And sometimes when you get there, you're like, yeah, we didn't find shit. That's it. No problem. So let me get to this one drink. Stephen Barrow says, cheers, fellas. God bless CM Punk and Ken. Oh, man. It's coming at you tonight, Steve.
My God. I can't think of two bigger slobs in the Chicagoland area.
We love our neighborhood slobs. Let's move over to Eloy Jimenez. You wrote a really interesting article at Sox On Tap, and I have it linked to the YouTube and both to the podcast as well, about how the White Sox need to trade Eloy Jimenez right damn now. And so, Steve, I'll pose the question to you just straight up. Why do they need to trade him right now?
You go back to Chris Getz and his initial press conference. I'm different. That was a very famous phrase that he said that is making its way around. It's becoming a very popular meme on the interwebs. The fact of the matter is, look, we all know Eloy is a net negative whenever he stands in the grass. He's a risk to himself and to those around him. We know that. He's a net negative on the bases. So when you have those two things working against you already, you have to mash. And if you are a corner outfield DH guy, that slug has to start with a 5. That is a non-negotiable for me. You go back, and if you look, since he came back from his torn tit in 2021, 1,047 plate appearances, 274, 327, 458. That 458, that ain't enough for me. I know that pencils out to a 116 WRC plus, but that's a walk rate, just a smidge below league average. And again, 458 slug for a corner outfield DH that gives you no value anywhere else on the field. Right. That's a problem for me. And if Getz is so steadfast on changing this roster, changing the dynamics and having guys with more defensive versatility, more athleticism, this is the guy that you kind of have to start with. And I know that a lot of people are coming at me about that, and that's totally fine. The expectation people have is that he's going to go somewhere else. He's going to go to a smart organization. They're going to make one small little tweak to his swing, allow him to get more loft into it, and you're going to see that perennial 40 home run guy. I remember reading something two and a half years ago that some dope on the interwebs wrote about Eloy being the first guy in franchise history to eclipse the 50 home run plateau. I can't even imagine what that moron is doing right now.
I remember that.
What an idiot. But I mean, really, just like I said, what it comes down to is the bat hasn't been enough. And that 458 slug, the funny thing about that is that's including that 250 plate appearance just barrage at the end of the 2022 season when he was slugging 560 over the course of that last 250 PAs. You take that out, and look, I know you can't take it out because it did happen, and he showed you the glimpse of that guy. But the totality of everything that he's done in the batter's box since the start of 2021, it's just not enough for me. Yeah. I mean, that 2022 second half, he was absolutely disgusting. And I kept trying to point it out to people, blogs and tweets and stuff. And people were already so down on Eloy from the injuries and stuff. It didn't move the needle for a lot of folks, like emotionally, I'm just saying. Not just like, they were observing of it, like, he's playing good, but they're like, too bad, fuck him. And then last year was another letdown year, Steve. And it's like, he would get a little start going, and then he would get an injury. But even after a while, he was playing and healthy, and it's like he just didn't really do anything. The walk rate that had popped up in 2022 had evaporated again. He hit more ground balls than he's ever hit as a percentage in 2023. Like, everything is kind of trending in the wrong direction. Now, in your article, you mentioned the trade value is dwindling, which you're right about. The salary's going up. I think he's going to make $12.5 million this year, and then he's got a couple club options for higher dollar values the following 2 years. And as you mentioned, he's a bat-only player at this point. I don't think there's any team that's going to line him up and say, well, we got to open an outfield spot for you. I mean, any team that's serious is going to do that right now. So, like, what do you think is fair value for getting his ass out the door? Like, well, what would you be willing to execute at? Because we did a couple of deals in our Treasy and I do a White Sox trade with every team, and we kind of looked at guys who
let's say they're tweener outfielders. They're not quite center fielders, but they could fake center. They'd be a good right fielder, but don't have the power for right field, like prospect level type players. There's a kid in San Francisco, I think his last name is Meckler. He was one of the Oregon State kids. Kind of like not a Stephen Kwan, but a little more power than that, but kind of like a lot of bat. Like, what do you think is kind of like something you could get for Eloy at this point?
To me, just looking at, again, the comments from Getz and from Barfield, it seems like the focus this winter is really going to be on athleticism and defensive versatility. So whether that comes in the form of a corner outfield spot or, God forbid they actually address second base and find something there that, can hold down the position for an extended period of time. That'd be a miracle. That'd probably be just too much to ask at this juncture here. But, I fully expect that whatever the return is, people are going to be upset about it because I don't think you're going to get a top 100 guy for him, given where that salary is at and the inconsistency from a performance standpoint, but then also the inconsistency from the health standpoint. The two of them have just very rarely been in line during his time here in Chicago. And so you're just looking at, probably some guys in like the 6 to 10 prospect range for a team. And then maybe you get somebody off of a major league roster that, is like a fringe starter. It's just not going to be a significant return. And I think a lot of people need to prepare themselves for that. And look, selfishly, I'm tired of Eloy. I understand.
There's a lot of Eloy fatigue, Steve. I agree with you.
Like the raw power's there. We all know it, but I just don't think that it's going to manifest itself here, coupled with being able to sustain health for any prolonged period of time. I'm worn out from it.
Yeah, I mean, you have to think about it from the perspective. I agree with you that it's dwindling, and you have to think about it from the perspective of if you play him this year and he becomes not really worth anything to trade for or whatever, and you run out of this year, you're not paying him $16.5 million or whatever his option is next year. He's just walking for free. You're just letting him roll out the door, and that's going to be the choice. Like we just watched Tim Anderson roll out the door. Now, different circumstances, but you sometimes you have to just make a decision, and it's the right decision financially or for the ball club or whatever to just let a guy go. And so I kind of see where you're going. Like, at this point, just get what you can get for an Eloy Jimenez. But the question always bounced back to me, and I've been thinking about these two guys in tandem now for since the second half of last year and even through the offseason. I did a short video showing this guy's WRC plus compared to other playoff teams and how many guys they have above that number. Why not trade Andrew Vaughn instead of Eloy Jimenez? He's got more control. Steve, lay it on me, baby. What's the deal?
Look, you and I have had this conversation. I am over the Andrew Vaughn thing at this point. We were talking about this in DMs when I saw your offseason plan there, and I saw you also on the Rhys Hoskins bandwagon there. That's a guy that, look, I would do that on a pillow deal. I don't know why he would want to sign a multi-year deal with the Sox at this point, but you do that pillow deal at least on a 1-year basis, and if he comes in and if he mashes, there's going to be interest in him at the deadline. So you'll be able to recoup something for him from that perspective, or God forbid you actually say, hey, want to stick around here and actually hit some more dingers? Because
our ballpark's good for that. Just like it was in Philly. You hit some home runs here.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would have no problem with that whatsoever. Look, Andrew Vaughn, a first baseman with over like 1,500 plate appearances and a 430 slug. I'm done. Like, I'm over it.
Yeah.
Service by not going out and getting a true DH and letting him start the 2021 season in AA after the pandemic. I think ultimately that's where this whole thing went off the rails. But once that decision was made, it was okay. You gotta go with it at this point, and it's just not there.
Yeah, he's not anybody better hitter then than he is now. Like, he has not improved in any way, shape, or form. He might improve one part and the other thing goes down. Yeah, I've been looking at it from that perspective, Steve, because I thought, well, he's got more control. He's not paid less right now, obviously, Vaughn. But I agree with you. Like, I just don't see where the impact, like who is sitting around thinking, I want the 5'9" first baseman, I'll turn them into a monster. Like, if he's not it already, like who's going to really do this? So it depressed me when we had a little DM conversation. I'm like, yeah, you think about it exactly the way I do. Fuck, we can't trade this guy.
And again, even Eloy has had 250 to 300 plate appearance stretches where he is an offensive monster.
Yeah.
Andrew Vaughn has never had that
No.
at any point. He had, at least a mildly decent start to the first half of 2022 when he was, maybe like an 820 OPS for the first half.
Yeah.
And then second half comes around. No, because he was standing on grass, so at 25 years old, his legs just couldn't handle it.
Get tired.
Out of here.
He got so tired. Now, Steve, I'm going to play devil's advocate here because I'm not convinced fully that I would dump Eloy at this point. And here's one of the reasons why. Now, wouldn't a team constructed as Getz is expecting to construct, and we've had discussions about this, lots of defense and a lot of speed and a little bit of punch. Couldn't they utilize an Eloy type? And aren't they not budgeting at all for a guy to just sit at DH and swing the bat? To me, it feels like, while I agree with you that the trade value is dwindling, I don't think he's blocking anyone with regards to plate appearances or meaningful plate appearances, I'll say, and that he would probably play DH. And if you kept him here, you'd give yourself one shot to see, okay, can he actually clean this up? Can he stay healthy for a little while? Or does that risk us falling in love with him with a good half season and then he's stuck here for a few more years?
Yeah, I just unfortunately look at it more of the risk calculus involved in it, and that if he does have that good first half and they say, oh, well, we've got these 2 option years, we think we're going to contend in 2025. We've got our middle of the order bopper. And then, he comes out in the second half of 2024 into 2025 with a 52% ground ball rate. And, he's just a ground ball factory left and right. And, that, or the flip side of it is, he's not shown an ability to stay healthy. That's one of my biggest concerns right there is you bring him back and you get that grade 2 hamstring strain. And next thing you know, he's out 2 months.
I was going to say it's at least a month. Let's get to this drink. Southside Mom. Thanks, Johnny. Says, cheers, gents. Who's more fragile, Eloy Jimenez or CM Punk? I'll let you have that one, Steve.
God. Well, I know mentally Pepsi Phil is a lot more fragile.
I'm still on the fence with this with regards to trading right now. I love your thesis and I love the article and everyone should go read it. My thought is this. For me personally, this is just for me personally, not for the ball club. I need someone potentially as entertaining as Eloy to be brought in, signed, acquired for me to be ready to get rid of Eloy. Eloy's entertaining not only because you're right, when he has 200 plate appearances where he's, crapping lightning and thunder, he's awesome. He's also awesome when anything happens and he gets injured on it. Like during Tim's fight, when he wasn't even involved, he's limping off the field, and I'm dying laughing watching the video. So I need at least someone as entertaining, Steve, to come through this door before before I'll feel good. I'll give my blessing for Eloy to go. Is that fair?
Listen, I can respect that. And look, I understand both sides of this equation. And again, just for me personally, the Eloy fatigue has run so high at this juncture that I'm just prepared to move on at this point. It sucks to say because, man, he was so much fun in 2020 when that team was hitting dingers all over the fucking yard. I missed that.
Yeah, no shit. It's too bad that the best season was the shortest season.
Right.
That's what really sucks about that. Let's get to this drink. Alexis Lopez says, here's the trading Eloy and CM Doppelgangers. Thank you, Alexis. Appreciate the drink.
She's just been making a lot of disparaging remarks towards me lately.
She's a big troublemaker.
I feel personally attacked by her.
You want me to block her out of the comments?
You might have to.
I'll look into that. I'll see how we can do that. All right, one last thing before you get out of here. I want to start taking people's temperature who come on this show about Getz. What do you think about the early Getz plan? And the early Getz plan seems to be, at least right now, to gut some salary, improve the defense, add depth. I mean, he the first deal added depth to the 40-man that I was impressed to see. Like, it wasn't a big thing, but it was a fundamental thing for me to look at and say, oh, that's pretty nice. I'm glad that he did that. Steve, where are you at on your early thoughts on Chris Getz?
It's a mixed bag for me, and here's kind of the analogy I've used to certain people. When Sleepy McDrunkface was removed from the dugout and Mr. Clean was brought in, and during that initial press conference, everybody talks you got to win that press conference.
I wrote about it. Yeah, I laughed about it because he won it, but that didn't mean shit to me at the time, and I guess I was right. But
you were at the forefront of that, so it's people liked what he was saying just because he wasn't Tony La Russa.
Yeah.
I think there's a segment of the fan base that likes everything that Chris Getz is saying, Kendall, because he's not lawyer boy. Yeah. So there's just this interesting dynamic. To your point, though, I think if you look at the Bummer trade in particular, and we talked about this pretty extensively, that's the type of move that this team should be making. They have no use for a left-handed late inning reliever that's going to make $5 or $6 million next year for a team that's going to lose over 100 games.
Right.
There's no value there. So you might as well move him for some pieces that maybe are change of scenery guys. And if you believe in Brian Bannister and what he can do on a pitching development side of it, maybe you get Mike Soroka back on track. Maybe you get Jared Schuster to be a back end of the rotation guy. Throw some shit at the wall and see what sticks. So those are the types of moves that I do personally like those as well. I know you were a big fan of that. Yep. They might not turn out to be anything, but at least it's something different. It's a departure from what we saw for the last decade. And that in itself is a positive in one sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where I'm at as well, because that trade to me, he looked at the 40-man and he looked at the 40-man like we've been looking at it for the last 7 or 8 years. There's a big pile of shit in the bottom 10 people here. How about we're going to go out there and for some parts of the trade, like the Soroka thing, they just got to cut in line because he was going to be non-tender. They just got to beat everyone to the non-tender and they get to keep him. Okay, same thing for Nicky Lopez. There's a small thing, but it's not nothing. And then you get a guy like Schuster who could be a back end of the rotation guy. And you get a guy like Shoemake who, you know what, maybe that guy only ends up being a AAA shortstop that solidifies the rotation down there because he can actually pick up a ground ball at shortstop. I don't know. But he at least looked at it like, we got a lot of crap. Let's trade this guy. Now, we normally might only make this for 1 or 2 guys, but we're going to make it for 5. And we're going to fill out some stuff down here. We're going to add some talent to this group. And it might not all fly. It might not all work. The way Getz is looking at it, at least to me, is the way he looks at the way I've been told he's done with kind of like the developmental program, where he brought them up to par, basically. They were down in the dumps. They didn't know what the fuck they were doing. They were medieval style on this shit. And he at least brought it up to where like other organizations said, oh yeah, you at least do some of the things that should be done here. And so that's what the early parts of Getz look like to me, which is hilarious given that how long Rick Hahn had that post. I mean, we'll include Kenny in there as well. Kenny was well past his prime. And so like, that's where like the minimal amount of, we'll call it optimism lays, but I need to see more. I need to keep seeing it, Steve.
Yeah, and I think 2 of my biggest criticisms are, and this is kind of piggybacking off of one of your last points here, is, you know, you allowed a guy to come in and assume more responsibility when his responsibility was the minor league farm system, which, let's be real about it, the shitty job that the farm system has done overall here is the reason why you're in rebuild 3.0 right now, because you didn't have a continual pipeline of talent that we were told was going to be here 7 years ago when that whole process started.
That's right.
So that's, you know, a frustration there. And then just, you know, some of the other comments that he made, you know, when he who shall remain nameless said, well, you know, I couldn't bring in anybody from the outside because it would take a year for them to learn everything that's going on. And then Getz says, well, I'm still trying to figure out everything that's going on. Not exactly a ringing endorsement there. So those are 2 critiques I have of it overall. But again, it is different from what Lawyer Boy was doing. And, you know, who knows? Maybe he's better at assessing those Dollar General guys in the free agent market.
That'd be helpful.
You know, because, I mean, look, that's where they're going to be shopping. Other teams are going to be shopping at Nordstrom. The Sox are going to be shopping at Dollar General here this winter. Maybe he can identify and find some better value and some better deals when he's walking down those aisles than Lawyer Boy could.
Let's hope so. Let's get to this drink here. Drew Bogue says, cheers to trading everyone except Blue Bob. Cheers, Drew. You know what? Yeah, I've heard a little whispers of like, oh, I mean, they're even listening on Luis. I'm like, no one's going to trade for Luis. I don't think anyone trades for Luis coming off the year he just had. I don't think anyone's willing to barrel that many prospects. I don't know. I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, I would find that very hard to believe anybody ponying up for that. And then, again, let's be real about this, though. If they are serious when they say that they think that they can turn this thing around look, we all know 2024 ain't happening. But if they think that 2025 can happen, which I'm still very skeptical of, kind of having a 6-win center fielder would go a long way towards doing that.
Usually that's what you're looking for. We already have that one piece. So
right.
That's good.
Right.
That's the furniture we got already.
Exactly. And it's cost control. It's not like you got to pay him $25-30 million in arbitration here. He's locked in. Build around him.
Exactly.
It's a concept. I know.
Good luck, Chris. Steve, thanks for bestowing your knowledge on pitching czar Brian Bannister, enlightening us to all the reasons why the White Sox must trade Eloy Jimenez ASAP as possible. Remember, we aren't trying to be right on the show. We're just trying to understand. Do you have anything you want to plug before you go?
Yeah, just come over to ontapsportsnet.com. You can read my piece today that I wrote about Michael Kopech and why I think he is Brian Bannister's first real test. And as Beef mentioned here, you can check out the articles on Eloy and Brian Bannister in general, as well as all of our great Sox content and lots of Connor Bedard content as well for the Sox fans out there.
Take care, Steve. Good talking to you, my friend.
Have a good one, Beef.
All right, bye. That was NWI Steve. I always love talking to NWI Steve, longtime guy in these White Sox Twitter streets. Next week's guest is not finalized yet. Okay, I have a terrific guest that I'm just trying to lock down. We're trying to get some approvals to get the person on here. I'm excited about it. I think once I explain who the guest is, once the guest gets in front of you, I think you'll all love it as well. But I cannot announce it yet, so I'm going to mum's the word on that. You'll have to keep tuning in and pay attention to the Twitter feeds. Thanks again to the 108 family who's up in the YouTube comments. Appreciate you smashing the like button, comments, and of course, drinks and tips. I love all of you. We'll see you on Thursday night for the 108 podcast. It's our 5-year anniversary show. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.